ready to complete the last leg of our journey, fitting the new windows.
Right, there are two ways of mounting the windows into the boat. The first is a self-adhesive foam tape that we can put around the flange of the window. This is very quick and easy to use, gives no mess, works very well on GRP or steel structures where the surfaces are very fair. The tape won't cope very well with lots of undulations in the surface because it won't take up the gaps very well. If that is the situation, or it's a wooden structure, then we recommend using a non-setting mastic to bed the windows in on, because that will take up the differences in the surface finish. So at the moment we're just going to fit the tape around this window. The important thing is to remember that the area for, or the most likely area for a leak will be around the joint in the tape. So we're going to put the tape at the bottom of the window, the joint at the bottom of the window, so that any water that runs just down the superstructure doesn't run up against the joint. So the window's just been unwrapped out of its packaging. The first thing to do is remove the clamping rings. Put the drill the right way. So we just need to remove the temporary screws that are holding the clamping ring in place. Right. Okay, so I'm just going to start sticking the tape on the window. It's important to remove the backing paper as you go, because otherwise the tape won't bend around the corner. As I say, it is self-adhesive, so don't pull it tight. Just let it find its own level and just place it gently onto the window flange, like so. Now the tape is quite soft and will tear easily, so you have to be careful not to pull it and break it. As I'm coming up to the joint here, it's important not to just overlap the tape and leave it long. What you do need to do is cut it maybe 5 or 6 mil long. But make sure you cut it accurately with a pair of sharp scissors, and again just then fit the ends so that you've got a nice tight joint. Okay, but don't overlap one on top of the other, because that way you get double thicknesses and you will get a leak down the joint. And then we just infill that so that we get a nice tight joint. And that is now the window ready to be mounted into the boat. So we're now going to fit the window.
You can see the tape squeezed out between the boat and the frame. This is exactly what you want.
Right, so that's the window fitted. I'm now going to go inside and fasten the clamping rings to hold it permanently in place. And once that's done, then we'll come round and we'll trim all the rest of the tape off here. Okay, we're now going to fit the clamping ring on the inside. It's important to note that the holes are pre-drilled in the frame, but they're not actually threaded. That's because we use a self-tapping machine screw. It's important when fitting the screws just to dip them in a pot of oil, just so that helps them cut the threads. So now I'm just going to position the clamping ring where I want it and secure an end. located into the hole. Just do it up lightly to start with. I'm just working my way around the window now, putting the screws in at either end. So now that's secured the clamping ring in place, I can now come around with the rest of the screws. Again, I'm going to set the torque setting on my screwdriver quite low so that I can come back and do a final tighten up later on. I can see that the window is just drawing in nicely onto the clamping ring. Okay, so I'm happy here that the joints are lining up. There is a slight gap, but that'll mainly be covered by a plastic trim that goes over the top. So now I'm just going to go around and just finish tightening up the bolts in turn. So I've just increased the torque on the driver, and I'm just going to go around doing every other screw to start with. This window's taken us probably 20 minutes to install from start to finish so far. The other point to note is that if you do strip a screw here, you can just drill another hole alongside it, because there will be a plastic trim to cover it. Nobody will ever see the extra screws. Okay, we're now going to fit the plastic trim that covers the screw heads here. The plastic trims at room temperature are actually very stiff and quite difficult to fit. So the secret to fitting all plastic trims is to just use a bucket of hot water and leave the plastic trim in hot water for a couple of minutes to soak, and it will become appreciably softer and much easier to put in. So here's my kettle and my bucket that I've prepared earlier. I'll put my hot water in, make sure it's as full as possible, and get all the trim in, and we just leave that for a couple of minutes to soften up. It'll appreciably soften and make it very much easier just to run it in around over the screw heads. Okay, I'm just going to feel the end of it, but as you can see now, I can quite easily push that all together. So now I'm going to fit it into the window. As you can see, I can just push it in with my finger all the way around. I'm trying to leave the remainder in the bucket for as long as possible, because the plastic will harden up quite quickly as it cools. Now when I come to the bottom here, I'm going to leave the plastic standing proud, and I'm going to fit the end. So that way the joint will be under compression, because the plastic's hot, it will tend to shrink back. So as you can see at the bottom here, I've left a little bridge for it to stand up, and when I push it home, that'll make the joint all under compression. You can always just glue the two ends of the plastic together as well, just to stop it shrinking back, but generally all you need is this compression. And then the last thing to do is just to remove the protective tape we put on the windows. And there we have a finished window.
Now we go outside and trim off the excess tape.
Okay, so now that we've got the window installed, we've got the tape squeezing out here. So we're just going to cut off the excess, and we just take a sharp knife and we're just following around the edge of the window. And then we just pull the tape off where we cut, move it, and there we have a finished window.
This is a textbook example, but if your boat is not so forgiving, we're going to show you an alternative method.
Okay, the second method of sealing the windows in is to use a non-setting mastic. The idea behind this is that we're not gluing the window in, the window fastenings are holding the window into the structure. This is just a sealant to stop the water coming between the window and the boat structure, so that if at any time in the future you ever have to remove a window because it's damaged, or you want to get something out through the structure, you can just undo the screws and take the window out. We found over the years that this is an excellent compound. It sets a bit like chewing gum, so it never really sets very hard, and it will move with the structure. So I'm now just going to cut the nozzle. So I'm going to cut the nozzle square, and then I'm going to make a V slit in it.
This sealant works particularly well with wooden and steel structures.
So I've made a V there. Now I just keep the tube upright, and I get a nice bead of arbor mast just coming straight out down the middle of the flange. Now one tube will do approximately 4.5 meters of flange. So as you can see, we now have a nice thick beading of arbor mast on the window, and we're now going to go and put that into the boat structure from outside. The thing to be aware of with this stuff is it's very, very sticky and it ends up everywhere, so be careful how you handle it. Okay, so we're going to now mount the window with the non-setting mastic into the boat. This really is best done with two people, just to try and avoid ourselves getting covered in the mastic. So here we go, Sam. We're going to lift that up, and we're going to just gently present that in. Get your bottom in first, as the actress said to the bishop, and we're just going to right, okay, and now I'm just going to go inside and tighten that up.
Make sure you hold on to the window, because you don't want this window dropping out. It will make a terrible mess. You can see the mastic pressing out as the bolts are tightened up. This is exactly what you want. It's filling every nook and cranny.
So as we can see, the mastic is squeezed out now from all the flange all the way around. One of the tricks that we found is to use a flat bladed screwdriver to work around the frame and put a brake line in the sealant, and then we leave that for 24 hours, and that'll just skin off, and using a wooden scraper or something such as that, so as not to damage the superstructure, you can just more or less peel it off in one long string. Any residue that's then left can be washed off with white spirit, but if you try and clean it now whilst it's wet, it will just smear everywhere and it will end up all over you and all over the window and just take ages to clear up.